Hey,
Hi, how are you?
I am doing well today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Like it's Monday. Wow,
Yeah.
came quick. How
Now the
was your?
days kind of blur together.
Yeah, it does blur. I know. It's less of a dramatic shift now in the pandemic than it was obviously before when people like come and go. Because it's like,
Mhm.
well, how many places? Where can you go?
Right.
There's far fewer. Are you guys still? Are you like really open for business in Maryland or?
They've taken a few steps back now, but we're pretty open. Like people can go to restaurants and such, but they've backtracked in terms of having people sit inside and eat.
Oh, okay. So yeah. So okay. So we're the same. Although I just saw a picture of people at the beach, at Miami Beach, and I was like, wait, what? Like, what changed? Nothing changed here. Like, why did people all of a sudden think that that was okay?
That's
Um,
like Ocean City here. It's
oh, is it like that?
people are like packed on the boardwalk and at the beach. I'm like, nope.
Yeah, I guess people are taking their vacations no matter what before school starts.
I guess so.
I don't know. Um, it's scary because it's really not safe. But I think maybe once school starts, it'll. Yeah, I feel like maybe this was the last weekend before a lot of people began school, so they were willing to take the, which is scary, all those people together, and then they might actually be in school buildings.
Right. Exactly.
Yikes. Hi, everyone. Hi, Kim. Hi, Shannon. All right, we're going to give everybody just a couple more minutes since this is somewhat of a new plan. Give people a chance to find the Zoom link and hop on.
I like your background, Reve.
Oh, thank you, Canva. I'm on constant Zoom calls, so I was like, I have to spice it up. So I have a couple that I switch out. Yeah.
Cool.
Let me see. So I'm going to pull up the classroom.
I'm going to confess there's a section of the podcast that I didn't listen to. I had to bail out early.
Yeah, it's fine.
So if I
It'll
add
be there for you. Yeah, it'll be there for you to come back to. But yeah, and I think we're just going to talk through the parts that like, there were some highlights. I took some notes when I watched it. I was there live, and I actually intended to go back and like rewatch it this weekend, and I ended up not having time, but I took notes during. So hopefully they're insightful enough. The session wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I don't know if anybody else had a similar.
Yeah, I felt it kind of like, it didn't feel linear, and I have a really hard time with that. Like I felt like the moderator would ask a question, and like it sometimes felt like all the speakers had their own agenda of what they wanted to say and speak instead of actually answering her questions. And so it would go off, and it was all valuable stuff, but that to me just made it really hard to like, I was like, what? Like, I know what the title of this is, but why do I feel like it's not, I'm not paying attention. So yeah, it wasn't what I was expecting either, especially given who was running it. I thought it would be more related to birth work, and I kept waiting, and I was like, and I'd like look at the time, and I was like, are we going to get there? I don't know. And so it wasn't what I thought it would be either. I mean, it was good discussion, and I took away some things, but it definitely was not what I was expecting.
Yeah, it was like lesson to you, Reve. Like, especially, I heard the title and I just thought, I just had my idea that it was going to be more of a how-to. I mean, they definitely gave you some strategies and some ideas, but I did think it was going to be a little bit more of a how-to and emphasize the co-conspirator piece. So yeah, it was a little different. Okay, so one of the things I think is helpful to me that I didn't get a lot of from the talk was to define for ourselves what is an ally and versus what a co-conspirator. So I want to hear you all, what do you think of when people talk about allyship, and like how is it, how do you act as an ally in your, you know, in your life with people?
Yeah, so for me, I feel like it's shifted. It's like evolved for what I think when I first started it, I was like, yeah, I'm an ally. I'm working on this work and everything. And then I got a little bit of this from, like I wrote down in my notes too, that in the especially in the last few months, I feel like ally has shifted for me in this way of this label that people throw around and don't actually put action behind. And so I never gave myself the title of ally, but I have just sort of given up that whole word.
Yeah.
In my vocabulary, because I feel like it's this this title that people feel like, oh, when I arrive there, then I'm good. I don't need to like keep doing the work. And I find myself getting into that space if I think of myself as an ally, versus a co-conspirator where it almost holds this level of accountability of like, okay, I've got to keep conspiring and I've got to keep doing this work and putting action behind the work.
Yeah.
So that's what it means to me, or has turned into.
Good, thank you. Shannon or Kim, I can hear you, I just have to get off camera.
Yeah, I mean, going off of what Vanessa said, the word changing, it's been interesting, right? Like, I feel like hearing from different black people that I know, where in some ways they're like, you need to be an ally, and other people are like, no, you're not an ally. I started to kind of get like, okay, what does that actually mean? What does that work look like? And I'm still confused, to be honest, about it sometimes, because I feel like I'm trying to have a variety of resources and sources that I'm getting my information from, and I find different people define it differently, and in some ways the word's been vilified, in other ways it hasn't, and so it is kind of a ever-evolving concept of it. And so for me, it's kind of like, as you said, it's I do want to be an ally to somebody, right? Like, so to me, I'm like, I do want to do that, but it's not something I'm ever going to arrive at. And I do think that, you know, one of the things that they talked about in there was, I think it was Dara, was like letting the perfect get in the way of speaking up and doing things, right? And so she mentioned that a lot, and it totally is something that in my head, I was like, well, until I'm armed with enough education and knowledge and feel like I can speak really intelligently and strongly about this, I shouldn't say anything. And so that was definitely where I was at for a long time with this, you know, starting the work a couple of years ago, where I was like, I don't feel comfortable, right? And so I think, you know, her talking about that kind of difference of co-conspirator and ally, to me, is you can't be silent. You have to be a co-conspirator. You have to speak up and do that work in that way. So I feel like I kind of got that, some of it out of the talk that it was, but I still, I'll be honest, I still was like, I don't know if they really clearly defined that for me. And I'm a person who's like, what's the definition? And I will follow it. And even in the beginning, when the moderator kind of read a definition, it was like through the discussions, I thought that would really become clearer. And I still felt kind of, because of the roundabout talk that was happening between all of them, where it felt like they were on different, I was hearing different talks rather than one cohesiveness. I didn't leave necessarily feeling better, but I think listening to you, Vanessa, now I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. Like you pulled that out for me. So thank you, because that helped.
Yeah, this was one where I was like, oh, we definitely need to do a debrief, because now I want to acknowledge, I think they had one or two people who were supposed to be present who weren't there. So, you know, sometimes when you're doing like a panel discussion, like other people have strengths, or maybe there was someone who was supposed to lay that foundation and they were missing. And so normally, you know, if you have a couple people, you're like, oh, it's a panel, we can make it happen. And they definitely made it happen. But I just so now wonder about who that person was that might have been giving us a little bit more foundational work, but we're going to, you know, we'll do it here. And yeah, hopefully it'll be fine. So, okay, and I'm taking down notes because I want to circle back to a few points that the two of you made so far. So yeah, Shannon, what are your thoughts when you talk about, when you hear the word ally versus co-conspirator?
My understanding of ally is that I don't get to call myself that anyway, because it's something that I try to be. I tell myself, I tell other people I'm being the best ally that I know how to be. That I can't say that I'm being an ally because there could be some level where I think I'm helping the situation when I'm actually stepping on somebody's toes. Maybe I'm doing them both at the same time, helping one person and stepping on someone. It comes and goes. It's because I don't have all the knowledge of all the understanding of what everybody goes through. Yeah, but when I started listening to the talk, I'd never thought about co-conspirator as a term, but to me, I think when I put the two things together, an ally feels maybe more passive, like, yeah, I'm going along with this. I'm on this track and not that track. While co-conspirator is more like, let's work on this. Let's do something and let's make a plan. And yeah, conspirator feels sort of sneaky and underhanded and maybe committing a crime to me. And I seem to recall they talked about that, like conspire means to do something, I don't know, like rebellious.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure where my thought is going with that, but how I feel, you ask, well, that's the thought in my head.
Yeah. Well, I think John Lewis would call it good trouble, right?
Yeah, you have to cause some trouble in this situation. You're
yeah,
right.
This is good trouble. So the ally thing has always been kind of an interesting concept to me, because I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, you need allies in the room, or part of, to me, an ally identifies someone who's not a part of your group or having the experience that you're having, like the experience of the oppressed group. So you're on the outside. And you're basically leveraging your position on the outside because you are involved in, you hear conversations, like over here sometimes, so you're privy to information. You are in a position to speak up, all of those things. Except what I found was it became kind of a tainted word for me over like the last year or two, because people were identifying themselves as an ally, like, oh, white allies. And I was like, oh, wait, no, she's actually not an ally, not to me. And then I was like, oh, okay. So what became problematic to me were people were identifying, it wasn't universal enough. That's how I felt. I felt like it's individual to the person. She's not an ally to me, but maybe she's an ally to you, because allyship to me requires trust. And it's also, it can be passive, like you said, Vanessa, like you can identify yourself as an ally and just like do nothing. Like, oh, I'm an ally, meaning I'm not racist. That's what it started to feel like to me was, oh, I'm not racist, I'm on your side, which falls in line a little bit to me with that, like I'm not racist. And like Dr. Kendi said, it's not enough to be not racist, you have to be anti-racist. So for me, I feel like the term co-conspirator is like that, it pushes it to that next level. So what I love about the word conspiring and being a conspirator, if that's part of your identity, is you are actively partnering with people. Like you're like, I got this bit of information and here's what we're gonna do with it. And yeah, you're gonna get yourself into some good trouble, but it's the kind of thing where, so if I come from the law firm perspective, oftentimes, Black people are, not in the partner roles or not in those roles where you make money and you work less. And so for someone to be a part of the steering committee or the search committee, who is a co-conspirator, then they're saying, I'm going to put you, because you qualify, I'm going to put your name in the hat, or we're going to, like I had someone where they were looking for someone to do moderation for like a talk on racism and whatnot for their school. And she reached out and she was like, okay, so here's what's in the budget. So when they ask you, when you give your money, like how much money you want, like just know that this is what's in the budget. She didn't tell me what to ask for or anything, but it's like, so that you're not so off base, but you also don't underbid yourself. So just know that there's money in the budget. And then, these are the things that we're concerned about, or what the big picture is. To me, that's, a co-conspirator. I'm like, okay, great. I still have to show up. I still have to perform. I still have to, win the spot, so to speak, but it's not unethical. And to be honest, I know that this is what my white peers have been getting. They've been getting the inside track forever. I'm used to competing blind and still winning. I'm used to not getting the leg up and still winning. That was my entire law school. When I found out that my classmates were having their dad's paralegal or legal secretary write their briefs, and I had been like sleepless for 2 fucking weeks with no lawyers around me to be able to tap into, are you kidding me? And if I got a B on that joint, I was like, I pretty much got an A+, because you didn't even do your work, right? Like you didn't even have the skill. So it's, I've been winning with nobody helping me forever. I'm used to that. So to have, people helping is like, oh, like, yeah, I know I can perform and I can do it without you, but it's really nice to like know that if I'm asking for 5,000, that might be the reason why I get, don't get selected when they really only have $2,000 in the budget, right? So why they don't tell people the price anyway is beyond me. It's just a way to disqualify people, but that's a whole nother story. So yeah, conspiring can be really good and really helpful, especially if you're like, I want you to have a fighting chance. And I also know that you're really good at this. This is not something that, this is a perfect fit for you. And I'm going to give you information that can help you win. I didn't get the gig, which is, by the way, which is fine, but it was really helpful to have someone on the inside or recognize, oh, I'm going to give her a little information so she's like, knows how to put a frame around this and be competitive, basically. So co-conspirator to me is that those little nudges and using your position, which allyship is like, oh yeah, you're on the outside, you're in on these conversations, but actually using the information to make good trouble or to bring people in or to open the door for people that will enhance the environment or help the project move forward. So so the term is kind of fun to me. I like conspiracies. Then I think, Kim, you mentioned perfectionism. Like not like, being an ally, you can identify yourself as an ally, but then never do anything because you're waiting to read all the books, to understand all the terms. And it's not like that. You can conspire, right? Like if you all are at home because of COVID and you hear about something in your neighborhood, you're like, no. I don't have to wait for terms or language or anything. I'm gonna go and address this, or I'm gonna help create an environment where we can make something better right where we are. I remember watching a little video on Facebook, and it was a bunch of little white kids, and they were doing their own like march or parade, and it was about 7 of them, and they were like, Black Lives Matter. It was just so cute. And I was like, oh, because kids, guess what? In COVID-19, they're still playing in their neighborhood, and they're making up gangs, and they're pulling their wagons and whatever. But it's like, oh, they're playing. I don't know what did we do? We played school. We played with our baby dolls, like we, played house, as we call it. So now what they see on TV, 3 and 4 year olds, what are they watching? Yeah, there's marches going on. So they're like, I want to have a march. And it's cute, but being able to infuse something right where you are is what it feels like to me to be a co-conspirator. It does require action, and it doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to be big. It can be, those small gestures that matter to one person. I think it's a ripple effect. Hi, Selena, welcome.
Good morning, everybody. I'm sorry I was a few minutes late. I was on a call that ran over.
No, totally. It's totally fine. So we were just, from the video, we were just talking about how we define or see allyship versus co-conspirator. So, the ladies shared a little bit about, what they thought about it. So I don't know if you have your definitions or how you see those terms being different or the same. Feel free to share.
So I feel like allyship is like we're all in this together. Like I really empathize and sympathize with you, and I'm going to educate myself so I can understand better. And that's the first step to being an ally. And I think so there's different levels to allyship. There are people who say, I'm committed to learning more and being a better ally and fighting with you in this fight. But before I can do that, I need to get the information and the education. And I think of it as being more of a sort of a mental space and like a learning space. And I think of being a co-conspirator as like you've got what you need in your toolbox, and you are willing to insert yourself into spaces on behalf of marginalized people, especially Black people. And an example of that, so there's passive and active ways of doing that, I think. Mm-hmm. And a passive example is, I don't know if you guys know about what happened at it's called Uzu restaurant in Baltimore, where that little boy had on some athletic wear, and he came in and his mother was told athletic wear wasn't allowed. And there was a young white boy around the same age who had just finished eating, and he was leaving with his parents, and they had on very similar athletic wear. And evidently there's a waiter who works there who is a really good friend of one of my white passing friends. And she was on a play-by-play with like, okay, he just sent me this question. He is saying that this is what his employers are planning to do. And I don't think this is enough. Like, tell me what you think, because I want to respond to him because he's really tight with his boss. And I want to know, like, does this sound right to you? Because what they were doing in response to the mother who made the video is they were saying they were going to change their policy to like no athletic wear for anyone over 13 or 12. And she was like, that's bullshit. She was like, this is a cultural thing. She was like, Black people wear athletic wear. It doesn't mean that they can't go eat somewhere. And so we were having this ongoing conversation. She was sending me text messages, and I was like giving her my feedback, and she was directly feeding back to this this waiter who worked there. And he is a man of color, but also white passing. And he wasn't really like, he didn't know, and he knew he didn't know. And so he was being an ally and reaching out to her because he probably doesn't have relationships with Black people that he could reach out to. So he reached out to her, and she reached out to me, and she was fired up. And she was like gonna boycott the restaurant. They've got different, chains all across, the United States. And she let him know, like, you tell your boss that is not acceptable. She was like, what is this relationship between athletic wear and Black people being perceived as thugs because they are wearing it, and white people being perceived as lacrosse players or whatever when they're wearing it? And so she was pointing that out. And so I thought it was a really productive exchange, and it was sort of this 3 ways kind of exchange. So I felt like for her, she wanted to insert herself in that fight. And when people in her neighborhood were complaining about the protests that were happening there, she was very vocal in defense of those efforts that were happening. And so I just think being a co-conspirator really sometimes means that you are the only bridge, like you are the only person that is even allowed into that space, and that you will not be silent, then you are a co-conspirator.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. And it doesn't have to be contentious, but facilitating a discussion or asking questions that cause them to make a more equitable policy. That's definitely, I wouldn't even call it good trouble. That's just the right thing to do.
Right.
creating a policy where you're saying no one over 13. Now, are we 13? Last time I checked, kids don't have IDs. So then I don't know if you're 13 or if you're
Right.
10. And that puts it on the hostess to ballpark it based off of their perception. And we know that Black and brown children often present older, or even with your own bias, your mind perceives them older than what they really are. And that sets up, an opportunity for discrimination, for, racial profiling. So the policy is problematic, from the beginning. I think that if they are an upper, a white tablecloth restaurant, then either nobody wears athletic wear. I don't know what you're trying to get, or no athletic wear after a certain time frame. I understand like at nighttime, you don't want tennis shoes and shorts and tank tops when it's dinner time. So maybe like that, having these discussions and knowing that, oh, this could be played out in a way that's inequitable for people, or problematic for our host staff, and inconsistent. That's the other thing. That policy, that's what bothers me, is that it will be inconsistent, based dependent on who's at the door and their own life bias and perceptions. So
right, like who's enforcing the rules and how does their bias play into how it will be enforced. I've gone to dinner and at nicer restaurants than that.
Yes.
And typically their policy is like, this is black tie, a jacket is required. And although the language isn't specific to children, it's like, don't be high class when it's convenient to you, because suddenly you want to take this archaic rule in your rule book that you've never applied this rule to anyone before.
Yeah.
And so we know how that works. We all know how that works. And really it's very Jim Crow-esque. It's very much like, oh, you have to, all of these rule books, all these rules on the books that are just enforced inequitably and unequally, and then people are targeted for these reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so my next question for you all, who are white, what's the benefit to you to be an ally or a co-conspirator? How does it benefit you? Because I feel like people don't do things unless they understand what's in it for me. So what's the benefit to you to be in this role?
See, equality in general benefits me. I mean, I think of people who've been killed or persecuted and told that they're not good enough, or raised in poverty because of all these inequities. And I think of like, maybe somebody out there was destined to cure the diabetes that killed my mom a few years ago, but that person was strung up from a tree in the 50s. What might the world be right now if this huge group of people hadn't been, and still are, we're treated right, given the same opportunities that some of us have. So that's it.
What do you think, Vanessa?
For me, it's kind of like two parts that I've seen and co-conspiring. That one is that I've developed some truly authentic, beautiful relationships, friendships with a variety of people. So both my Black friends, my friends who are people of color, and then also my white friends who are committed to the work. And it creates, I was just talking with a white friend of mine last night about this in a different group that I'm in, and we were discussing how it creates this level of like accountability within the friendship that makes it like enriching for all of us, and that it benefits all of us, and that it creates this like level of authenticity, that there is this trust and this understanding that I'm going to hold you to this certain standard amidst like my white friends or whatnot, that it's like, you need to call me on this stuff when I do it, and I'm not going to take it personally because we're evolving together. So that, and then I've also seen in the co-conspiring too, that the gains are with that intersectionality of like, it benefits, kind of what Shannon was talking about, it ends up benefiting everybody when we do these things. And I've seen that within the white men in my life who have started doing this work, the level of respect that I have received as a woman within the last month from them, it's like they have risen to the occasion to do this work. And as a result, whether they're aware of it or not, it's directly benefiting me as well. So those are just two things.
Yeah, you actually make a point that we bring up all the time when we are having to address why we're not, why the work that we're doing around racism is specifically talking about anti-Blackness. And people are, why we have to keep talking about like Black maternal mortality, the white women who are dying too. And it's like, yeah, well, when we actually address all the issues and we start preventing and shifting ourselves to make sure that Black women who are birthing or have recently birthed are not dying, then trust me, white women will start living. Like we're gonna, yeah, so everybody benefits from doing the work around anti-Blackness because of its specific insidiousness. So you bring that point. So you're benefiting as a white woman. All right. I like that. I like the admission. What about you, Kim? How do you think you benefit from this work?
I mean, and it was brought up in the webinar as well about benefiting as a white person, which was a struggle at first when she said that. I was like, but we already benefit right, from the society. What that looked like. But for me, it's the reason I do this work is once I found out and heard the truths, and as I continue to hear the truths with listening to like the 1619 podcast, and my eyes keep getting open, and they talked about this too, like the awakening and all of that. It doesn't feel like I could continue to live in ignorance knowing what I know. And so for me, that benefit is just, it is, soul work. And I think one of the panelists talked about that as well. And it's, I can't move forward in a world where I know these things, but yet I think that I should still live without the knowledge that I have. And so that benefit to me is continuing to better myself, and then, my children, and talking about it with them in a way that, discussing too, they talked about like children of, like Black children are talked about race, as young as 3, and white kids aren't, and they learn about racism, in other ways in school, and even, listening to and finding out how whitewashed my history, and relearning history and America, like all of that whole big picture to me is, when you have children, you always want to better things for them. So it does benefit my children, but it benefits everybody in society, and it's the whole bigger picture of it. So it's this huge 30,000 foot view of, we have to make things better for my children and society and all the children, but also like within my family, like we have to make it better for my family. And, as Vanessa talked about too, like the white men in my life, and like the conversations that I've had with my husband and my brother-in-law, and also having those conversations and the learning that we're all doing together, it just does benefit everybody to have that different lens. So, I mean, the benefit is it's multiple. And I also feel like, my Black friends, like I can't be authentically their friend if I don't even try to understand it, right? And I will never understand it from obviously a Black viewpoint, but it's like, what kind of person am I? And so it's like, it's a crisis. It's like an internal thing. Like, what kind of person am I to know this shit and not do something about it? Like that, I can't reconcile that as a person and so that's my benefit, is like, I have to do better and learn more and keep going forward. And even if it makes me uncomfortable, and even if I have to confront it and like stop and like rewire my brain thought process, all the time with it, that's what it is.
Yeah.
The work I have to do, right?
Yeah, it is the work you have to do. It's interesting. So you bring up like the Black friend thing. I have said to people, I said, this is how you know if you have a Black friend. Do you all talk about race? If you don't, do they talk to you about their experiences? If y'all don't talk about race, y'all are not friends. Y'all friendly, you are acquaintances, you're probably neighbors, you're probably co-workers, or your classmates or your peers with one another, but you are not friends. If that part, because it's such a huge part of our life and how we navigate and move through the world, that if we're not sharing that in an intimate conversation, like, you know, I call the unburdening, we do that with one another. If I'm not doing that with you, we are not friends, not close friends. But my other litmus test is, you know, if you have not eaten in their house, y'all not friends. Really, if you know, people who come in my house are their family or friends. So that's the other litmus test. But I digress. Okay, good. Thank you for that, Selena. I don't know.
Question. Yeah, I actually have a question. The last thing you said. My question is, so you're making the distinction between if a Black person has had them invited into their home and not the reverse.
Right. Oh, yes.
That's important.
Yes.
Very important. And the reason I say that is because I've been working at the same place for almost 9 years. This is my regular full-time job. And I work with some very well-meaning white people who I think they absolve themselves of the work they have to do, because they're like, I mean, I invite them to my Christmas parties and, you know, everyone is welcome in my home. And so like, I invite them into my space, but that they don't recognize there has to be something more than that. I mean, my white friends come to my house, spend the night at my house. We fall asleep on the couch watching movies. And I get that there are different levels of relationships, but never has a coworker been to my house.
Yeah.
And so it's not a two-way.
Because, and I'll say that because our homes have been our sanctuary. That's been our safe place, right? Where we're hiding from police, law enforcement, where we come in and, you know, after we've been cleaning houses and feeding your babies, we come in and it's like, and we are unburdening. So to have someone in our space, that kind of sacred space, is a big deal.
Yes.
I mean, Rive, I would love for you to bring that up in the larger group, because that, honestly, that just fucking blew my mind.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like, I'd never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I'm mentally going through my list and I'm like, oh, there's been one Black friend who I've been invited to her house. And that truly, like, it did. And I think it'd be fair to say that probably will in the larger group. Like, if you asked, like, how many of you have been invited to your Black friend's house? And I'd be curious, you know, like that concept. Yeah. Just
so in
blew it open.
The way we operate in society, we have to interact with white people, and so our jobs, we want to be effective, we want to be pleasant, all of that, and so we're friendly. And if you work with someone for 10 years or 15 years, you learn things about them. You might eat lunch together. You may have similar opinions about things. You might have worked on projects together. But if you've never been in their home, that's something about, like, to me, indicative of where you are in their heart or in their inner circle. Because generally our homes are really private. It's, the one place we can go to close out the world and get recharged to go back out there and fight another day. So to bring that into our space, there has to be a lot of a really strong relationship connection and amount of trust. I think the other litmus test is like caring for my children. Do I trust you in a personal space for you to like have my children in your, because, and not like a play date. I guess so I may roll this back a little bit, but not like a play date, but like, like a sleepover, but long term, like a couple days. Like, do I trust you with my children? Maybe another layer to that, but especially if they're a Black boy in particular, a Black male in particular. So Yeah, we can ask that in the larger group for people to help assess. Okay, all right. Any other takeaways from the talk, the webinar? The one gentleman who was on the panel, it was nice to have a gentleman on the panel. He emphasized like if we take something, we must give something back, like tapping into our chi, like this exchange. And so I thought that was helpful in with the idea of allyship or co-conspirator work is important because it helps create that exchange of energy. You all are benefiting in some way, or we're in this space together, and having that exchange of energy is important. I don't know if anyone had anything to talk about in that regard, because I thought as, oh, this is my duty or responsibility. This is what people on the outside of the circle must do in order to uphold their end of the exchange. So I don't know if anybody had any thoughts around that. Even just as a human, I think, Kim, you were touching on that like that soul responsibility. Like once you're opened up to it, you're like, I feel like this is my human responsibility. Like it wouldn't be humane for me to walk around and act like people aren't being harmed or hurt or racism doesn't exist. Especially now that you're aware of it, you're almost like you can't unring the bell.
I mean, I think the exchange, you know, when he was talking about that, I made me think about this group, right? And it made me think about how many people we have in this group now, and, you know, showing up to these talks and going through it can't be performative, right? And that, I think she touched about that at one point in time too, about allyship. Like you can't be performative. You can't just say I'm an ally, but do nothing to actually do that, or get bogged down with everything. And so for me, even when it's like, some of these times aren't convenient, you know, whatever that looks like, it doesn't fucking matter. You have to show up, you know, and just push through and realize the exchange you get is always going to be beneficial. Like even if there's like, you know, like, oh God, I have to push to get, you know, whatever that is, I know always walking away from these conversations, I'm going to be better for them. And so you have to sometimes like keep that there. So that exchange, it has to be there, whether it's monetary, you know, and whatever that is, but you can't just be in the group and not show up. I don't, you know what I mean? And sit in the background and just take and think that you're giving, but you're not actually. And so to me, that exchange that he said makes sense. Like there has to be this thing, like you putting out all of the work you do for this, like despite being paid for it, you're not doing it just to like give us this clean cut thing. So to me, it's that the work that we have to do with ourselves, even when we don't feel like showing up. And I have to remember, like, well, I get the fucking choice. Like, how great is that for me? No, you know what I like, and recognizing it again, it's just that like understanding, like, oh, how great it is for me. And I think about, this was a couple of months ago, I want to say, you know, it was after George Floyd, and, you know, everything was kind of exploding, of course, on Facebook. And I had a white friend who was like, if you're racist, I don't want to be your friend, unfriend me. And I was like, what the fuck is that? I was like, that is our job though. I was like, you saying that is not, what is that? That does nothing, you know? And I kind of pushed back on it. Like that kind of stuff pisses me off. I don't know what that is. And so it's interesting to me that people who I think are doing the work or understanding and speaking up, and then some of that stuff comes up and that missing link, right, on all of it. And so for me, that exchange it's ongoing and it's constant and it looks differently, and it's talking to people and showing up. So yeah, it has to be back and forth, or else what's the fucking point, right? I don't know. I swear a lot. Sorry, guys.
I do too. Yeah, I haven't seen that yet. I don't mind it. That means you're comfortable. Yeah, that, you know, it is an exchange. And I think for me, I mean, I spent a period of my time where I was just like angry that like you all didn't have to do the work, and I had to experience the harm. And I obviously am in a space where I'm like, yeah, white people need places and spaces to learn and to have, just to get comfortable using language and noodling some of these ideas around with other like-minded people. there are lots of spaces I wouldn't be able to do this work. So I, you know, in the very beginning, I was like, listen, if you think white lives matter, if you're that person, this is not the group for you. I can't even talk to you. I can't even begin to have a conversation with you. So, or all lives matter, I can't do that. So you have to come to the table with a certain amount of awareness, and then we can go up from there. But yeah, talking about that energy exchange, it is important. But it also is important to have safe spaces. I think like the example you used, Kim, were like, oh, if you're racist, you can unfriend me. Well, that's not helpful. Where are they gonna, I mean, it's just not helpful. Where are people gonna learn? And it's similar to like, I can't remember who in our group, but she was coming in hot every time and was getting lots of resistance. And I suggested, I was like, try coming in warm, just a little bit. So people know like oh, is it you? Oh, so that you can be like that soft spot, or for people to be like, oh, okay, I know she's doing this work. I have a question. People gotta be able to ask questions, and they're gonna mess it up. They're gonna say it wrong, and they gotta know that they're not gonna be like villainized or lose their jobs over it. I mean, that's how bad, I mean, people were definitely losing jobs over their Facebook posts, and people were being called out, like their livelihoods were really at risk. And in my opinion, depending on the role that they played in the space and, you know, in their companies and stuff, rightfully so. Like if you're just blatant racist, then you shouldn't be leading anything where you're benefiting from Black and brown harm. But at the same time, you know, being that soft spot, or being the warm spot, letting people know that I have the passion, and they can learn, you can bring people along that way. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. There was only a little bit of crossover in this particular conversation. So Selena, we talked about how the conversation, that the way the webinar went wasn't exactly what we thought it was gonna be. It ended up being like a little bit different, because I wanted to hear a little bit more about the crossover with Latinx community. And they didn't spend a lot of time talking about like that, you know, the allyship, co-conspirator, and then anti-Blackness, but also with Latinx community. So maybe they're gonna do a follow-up or whatnot, because that's a place where I don't have a lot of, I don't interact with a lot of Latinx people. So I don't know I don't have a skill set around the nuances, and I was hoping to get like a little bit of insight around that. But they did talk about how anti-Blackness shows up in the Latinx community. And I wonder, and then the Red Table Talk, that's another talk we're set to review. They talk about, so they have the Latina at the table. I can't remember her name, she's an actress, but she speaks to it just a little bit in that discussion. But I don't know if anyone had any feedback around what they learned, their takeaways around the crossover with anti-Blackness in the Latinx community.
I think that one of the things she focused on, like I remember that she gave sort of like that history and showed the way that European Spanish people dressed, and how it sort of kind of fed into, I mean, really what was like a caste system, and, you know, going further with that. And so I think where it ended in that talk is just that acknowledgement that there is a lot of colorism in the Latinx community, and there are a lot of sort of prejudices. There's a lot that they have to contend with even before they can start to be allies for Black people. And I definitely have experienced that in my own life. Yeah, like we have, I'm married to a Puerto Rican man, half his family married white people, the other half married Black people. And there's like a very, very distinct division in the family, because the white half of the family, there are some Trump supporters there. And the Black half of the family and there's also some law enforcement officers on the white side. And so we're getting Blue Lives Matter, and we're getting All Lives Matter from one side of the family, and we're getting like Black Lives Matter, like you don't know what you're talking about, like this is your family, like we're your family, what is wrong with you all? And so and then I have a girlfriend from Ecuador, and when she was young, she dated a Black guy for 5 years, and she hid the relationship because she wasn't allowed to date. But when her mom found out about the relationship, She said, "Why do you have to dig from the bottom of the barrel?" And my friend said, "Oh my God, Mom, you are racist," to this Ecuadorian woman that is her mother. And so those are the kinds of things that, you know, being very close to a lot of Latinx friends and having, you know, people in my family that identify that way. Yeah, there is this thing where, like, if you're Mexican, you're better than the El Salvadorian and all of those things. And so it sounded to me like the way that talk ended up is like, you know, we got a lot of work to do, and definitely we got to do our work so that we can show up.
Yeah. Okay. You said a mouthful. So do we all understand colorism? That concept? So
is it just I think so, but yeah, go ahead.
I mean, just like in real general, and we can probably do a little thread on language and like definition, how it shows up for education purposes. But colorism, when people, so a bias and a mistreatment, or a preferred treatment, a preference for people who are lighter skin versus darker skin. So, and it happens within cultural groups. So amongst Black people, we do have discussions around, you know, it's a thing if you're light-skinned Black or a dark-skinned Black person, sometimes to get into organizations, sororities, or colleges that are historically Black, you needed to pass what we call the brown paper bag test. So y'all know the brown paper, like a brown paper bag is brown. My placenta bags are brown paper bags, but I don't have any here. But it's brown, and if you had to be, basically to be admitted to some organization, you had to be lighter than the brown paper bag. If you were darker than that, then you had only a certain, you had to go somewhere else. So it's, again, creating like a caste system. But you know, being light was right and being dark was not. I mean, and that comes up, you know, like in Latinx communities about, you know, yeah, like people wanting to pass for white. I mean, it's all over the world, right? This is what colonizing has done. Yeah, the brown paper bag. So do you pass?
I wouldn't pass.
You're darker. Yeah, you're darker.
I wouldn't pass.
Yeah. So and except your hair texture might get you in, girl. And who you married, right? Like, I see a picture of your husband. So he's lighter skin, right? And your babies are light. So maybe you would actually be able to join the club.
And I have.
Yeah.
And I know that I am being allowed into spaces that I would not be allowed into if I were brown skin, darker skin, if I had dreadlocks, if I had a natural hair, you know, like the hairstyles I wish I could have that I can't because my hair will not do what it's, you know, it's very flimsy and, you know, whatever. I know that I'm being like, I'm a comfortable brown. I'm like, I'm a more,
we can work.
I'm more palatable.
Mm-hmm.
I know that. And this paper bag test is important because my mother's side of the family is from North Carolina, and my grandfather and his brother were the difference between like a Hershey chocolate bar and then his brother was red-haired and was lighter than this paper bag. And so my uncle Junius was allowed into the military and my grandfather was not.
Yeah.
Based on the paper bag test.
Yeah. Yeah. So it happens inside, within our cultures, but also on the outside. And it, again, dealing with that bias. It's fascinating. That's a whole nother conversation. And there is a couple of videos we can certainly post, and we should, around that. But it goes back to like the Harvard test on implicit bias, like your preference for lighter skinned people. You think they're prettier or they're nicer, like you start to, without even really knowing them, add all these positive attributes to them and all the negative attributes to the darker skin. So my bias is for darker skin, because I know that's a safe space for me, because I'm like you, Selena, I'm in the middle, I'm palatable, And I also have very long hair. So when my hair is straight, it's like, oh, and and I can flip it. And also when it's wet and it's curly, it's like, oh, she doesn't have, that harsh, that 4C Negro hair. She has, a soft curls. Maybe she's Dominican, maybe she's Indian. Like, how many times people wanted to make me Cherokee? I'm like, I'm sorry. Come on, y'all. No, I'm like to be black. But I know that I'm a little bit more palatable than other people in people's immediate bias.
And if I could just chime in with colorism to make help other people understand it, it is when you're aligning with whiteness. And so the issue is that there's a lot of self-hate in Black and brown communities, and the whiter you're held to the standard of whiteness. So the whiter you are, the whiter you talk. I mean, there are people in my husband's family that were only allowed to play at night, like outside, like when the sun went down, because those parents didn't want their children getting tans. They didn't want them getting darker. And so these are the kinds of things. It's like Paul Mooney said it best: if you're white, you're right. And so, and so basically it is in the Asian community. This is happening in the Latinx community. This is happening in the Black community, and within the Black community, where there's there's a lot of tension between, oh, like she just got that because, she got good hair, or that sort of thing. And so, right, exactly. So it's a big topic, and definitely I think it'd be useful to have like another talk about it.
Yes, I see your hand, Kim. I just want to add, one of the places where the colorism popped in and I was like, oh, was Indian Matchmaking, the series on Netflix. The matchmaker kept saying, oh, she's tall, she's athletic build, she's fair, da-da-da. And the word fair kept coming up, and I was like, oh, she talking about fair skin. Oh, no, she ain't. And then when I looked, I was like, oh my God. And I was like, ooh, look at it. And it can slide right past you if you're not tuning in. But yeah, she was saying, yeah, they're fair skinned because in Indian culture, you dark, we can't work with you. You're not marriageable material. Yes, Kim.
So my question, it's fascinating because fairness as a white person, like being pale, I can't tell you how much I was made fun of for it growing up, right? Like, oh, you're not tan, Kim can't get tan. Like, it is this ideal to be tan and have a good tan and be able to do that. And I like, that's interesting to me. And what is that there, that this tan skin is ideal as a white person, and being pale and fair is like, I can't tell you how much I was made fun of it growing up, that I couldn't get a tan, right? And so I just find it's just really interesting to me that then that is this ideal in the white culture to be tan and have that skin color and the spray tans and all the shit. But like in other communities, being white is it's just I don't know what that is, and so I'm just, what is that?
So I think it comes down to like that standard of beauty, but it's one of those things where you can choose it, or maybe you got teased because you couldn't choose it. But it right now, usurping or portraying or using Black culture is attractive. So adding in a big butt, or filling out your lips, or adding, cornrowing your hair, whatever. People go to the island, they get like, see, I got cornrows. And it's like, ooh, we did that for survival. We cornrowed our hair we hid things in our hair, seeds and stuff coming from home, so that was for survival. And so to see a white person use it, it's like, no, it's not just a hairstyle. Those are some cultural survival things that we use. So, but using Black culture and being able to take it on and take it off is, acceptable in white culture, but actually being Black or brown for real is not. It's just like, you can be an ally, you can be a focus, you can choose to do this work or not. You all still have the privilege of taking it on, or taking, putting it down, and put, whatever. But so I think it's the same contradictions that we speak about in terms of like Kim Kardashian and that whole culture. you know, or
I think there's
kids listen to rap music or hip hop music, like you like our music and you like our dance and you like us entertaining you, but you don't like us.
Mm-hmm.
So in that same line.
Kim, I think it's also, there's a little self-hate going on there too, because it is always, my kids are always like, so why do white people want to be tan, but then they're racist against people that have darker skin? Like, I don't get that. And so it is sort of like that grass is always greener kind of thing. And also there's a patriarchal component to that, because attaining a standard of beauty that is not really possible. So basically, convincing white women they have to have a big butt and big breasts and fuller lips, but also fetishizing brown and Black women who have those attributes. There's a lot of patriarchy going on there too, but definitely I hear Kim when she's saying like she got teased for not, you know, being able to tan or being pale. But what I'll also say is when it comes to colorism, there is this thing, right? Because my kids look racially ambiguous. My daughter said it best. She said, to my white friends, I'm Black. And to my Black friends, I'm whiter. And so there's this, and I was like, wow, you know, I grew up with the exact same thing happening, but I didn't know how to put it in those words. And she's absolutely correct. Because I mean, we don't fit into the black and white, like we don't fit into the box. And so we're, you know, kind of just floating around out here trying to figure it out. But yeah, it's definitely, you know, I am more palatable to white people. I'm pulled into white spaces. I'm invited. I am welcomed. And then, even with some of my Black friends, like growing up, there was a little bit of confusion. Like, but wait a minute, like, what do you mean? Or like some of my culture wasn't the same. I grew up with a dad from the Caribbean, so we didn't do, like, our food was different. Yeah. Like some of those things were different. And so, you know, I've been having to navigate and not in a binary sense at all.
Yeah, because Black is an umbrella, right, for the people in the diaspora. So what's happening with Black Southern descendants is not the same in, you know, the descendants from Guyana or Barbados, or, you know, somewhere along the way we got dropped off the boat. The boat went to a different place, and we're having a different cultural experience. And there is even, we see the rise of cultural challenges or conflicts, or the way that we address Blackness even amongst one another outside of the colorism challenge. So yeah, it's complex. It's complex. Yeah. Okay. So are there any takeaways that you all want to share, or any aha moments? We can go around and do that. The hour goes by fast. Sorry. Could probably talk for quite a while. Any takeaways that you wanted to share when you were like, oh, I'm gonna hop on this call, that you want to make sure we call out or talk more about at another time? Yes, I see you, Vanessa.
Well, there are a few different ones. Kim kind of touched on it a little bit with the perfectionism, with the performative aspect. And the one thing I wrote down in like a huge circle around it is the sense of like urgency plus perfectionism plus performatism. That is what is equating that fragility, that it's like the sense of I have to learn everything right now, and I need to absorb all this information to achieve that allyship space, and then be perfect at it and say the right thing at the right time and be perfect in everything that I'm learning and everything I'm saying and doing, then comes across as this performative piece of like, you know, well, I'm doing all of this. I'm in X amount of groups and I'm reading X amount of things, which is then equating to really it's more of that, what we talk about, that shallow sort of allyship where there's not always like the action behind it. It's not just what we put out in the world, but it's also what we're doing like in our homes. It's what we're doing when people aren't watching us. It's doing the, you know, not like sparkly, glamorous, look at me work. It's like the nitty gritty work with it. And the other piece they touched on a little bit, and I've heard this in a few other like webinars recently, and have posed the question to a few people and have had some interesting conversations around this. Is they led to the book White Fragility, and Robin DiAngelo and everything, and how I see it as very problematic. And I've had a lot of white people coming to me of like, but I read it and I gained all this information and now I'm wanting to do the work. Why is this problematic? And it kind of ties into everything we talked about too, where it's like, well, it's okay for a white woman to come out and benefit from saying all of these things, but there's no action behind it, and that becomes performative. And now all this stuff has come out about how she owns like 3 homes and charges like 3 times what Black women do for the same thing. And when they're literally like, you know, many, pick any name, there are many different Black authors out there, and specifically Black women, who aren't getting paid the same and acknowledged the same for this work. So I felt like she's kind of the perfect example of that in many ways, but that's like a whole nother thing, I guess.
That is, yeah, it's a good topic for us to go into in terms of where are we learning this work and who are we willing to pay for it. The other part to me, I think that you spoke about, which I like the equation, and so I'll do a thread so you can put that equation up, and under the promotion of that webinar, we should add to that thread for like some of our takeaways. If you all can add your comments, I think it would be helpful for people who are going to watch it on their own and not do the debrief with us, but they, you know, so that they can have some things to look at and investigate more. That perfectionism really can keep you frozen, and it's toxic. But I also, when I think about white fragility, I find white women who are doing this work fragile when I'm like, oh, okay, no, that wasn't okay what you just did. And I'm trying to work with them, and it's like, no, but I'm doing this, and I'm not racist. And I'm like, I didn't say you were racist. I'm saying what you just did is harmful, and I want you to reconsider it. And we should have a conversation. See, because I thought you were doing your work. I thought we can have this conversation, but I'm finding them to still be fragile. So I'm still getting the white tears, the shutdown. And I'm like, oh, you're not really doing your work. Like you're showing up acting like you are, but now that you've hit a rough spot, and this is a learning opportunity for you, you're, you know, I don't know. I think I used the word regressing, but maybe you weren't actually making progress all along. But here's where the work happens. It's great to read a book and stuff, but baby girl, you are not doing the work. You don't know until you have a falling out with somebody, until you actually hit a rough spot and somebody tries to tell you, hold up that mirror to you and check what happens. Did you get defensive, or were you like, okay, let me sit with that? And then coming back to open the conversation. Because I got about 5 white women right now who are like in their defensiveness, and I'm like, yep, you're not ready. You're not doing the work. And it was all because it was this performative piece. And while, yeah, so I think the book is good in that it does highlight something that is definitely happening, but it's happening with people who are out here like looking like they're doing the work. And when they hit the first rough spot, they don't know how to recover or how to fall into it or how to fall forward publicly. So that's a skill we all really need to get comfortable with, for sure. Yes, Kim.
Speaking on that fragile piece, when they discussed it in the talk about how Black women aren't allowed to be fragile, you know, and also not allowed to be Black and angry, you know, like it is that exhaustive place that you have to be in, you know, as you're doing this work of, it was really interesting, and specifically talking about the white fragility and like how we talk about the white fragility of it all and our tears and all of that. But like, as Black women, you're not allowed to be fragile and not be seen that way. And it was a really good kind of little sentence that was just really like, yeah, you're right. Okay. What is that? What is that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. How often have you seen a Black woman cry? In a movie, on TV, It's especially why I get frustrated with this reality TV, because when you like Love and Hip Hop or whatever, Housewives of Atlanta, we rarely see them fragile and soft. We got to see them fighting and mad and arguing, and it feeds into that cycle. Now we can do both. Let me just be clear. We can do both, but showing the vulnerable side is not it's not popular. It doesn't feed the narrative. It doesn't fit the paradigm, what you want to believe about us, so we don't show it. But it goes back also to like why our homes are a safe space, because we do a lot of unburdening, and it's where we can be hopefully vulnerable, and where we do have shed tears. So yeah, we don't in a lot of spaces get to be fragile. People don't necessarily think a Black woman fragile, gentle, soft, and all of that. And we're all of those things. We're we're everyone.
Like our go-to emotions, right? Like we don't have the luxury of sadness to be our go-to emotion. We have to fight and advocate for ourselves and defend ourselves. And when you've been that way forever, your first response is anger, defensiveness, and advocating. Like, wait a minute, what did you just say? And it's like you are on the offensive. You are not like, how could you say that to me? Like, I don't have that luxury. I would be crying every damn day. I don't have that luxury. I have to educate people in that moment, and I have to say, you know what, that is really problematic. And I don't agree with you, being dismissive towards me. Don't dismiss me. And like these are things I've said within the past year, because, in a workplace, because, people are just like blowing you off like you don't matter at all. And so I just have I don't have the luxury, but I see at work, the white tears are so powerful, because they are like, oh, it's like a superpower. Like, and it doesn't even have to be a big display. It can just be like, okay, well, she's really upset right now, so let's just give her space. And it's like, wow, really? If I did that, they would be like, is everything okay at home? And it wouldn't be about this moment that we're in where I'm experiencing this. And I think it's really a very rich comparison for us to like walk away today thinking about white fragility was the efforts of a white woman to educate, right? And look at what is happening. Even this person that went to the length to write this book, that is probably a good thing because it is palatable to people who would otherwise not want to read that book, is now being criticized for doing, like, basically not being conscious enough in the way that she has, acquired wealth from this book and those sorts of things. And so this is a perfect example that someone that probably had great intentions in writing this book is also guilty of like not being perfect. And so let that be sort of brings you some peace. Like, you're working at this and you're doing your work and you're learning, but even a person that wrote a book is like being criticized for not getting it right. And so
so true. So Robin can redistribute that wealth. She definitely can. She can sell a house and donate to an anti-racism cause, and some of this public outcry probably should push her to do that, to redistribute some of this wealth and her power. So again, that performative stuff, and it's layered, right? Hopefully she has people around her, she has real relationships where she can get the feedback and receive it and do something about it, because it's not enough to just hear it. You actually have to shift and change. So thank you. Any takeaways, Kim, that you want to share, or Shannon, from the webinar that we didn't talk about?
I think Vanessa, I think a minute ago, she kind of pointed to the one that now my brain's all discombobulated. There was
she said a lot, yeah.
when they emphasized that you don't have to have it all figured out right now, and you don't have to be perfect right now, and you don't have to make absolutely no mistakes ever right now. Calm down, like to us white people, calm down. It's okay to just be calm, not have it all figured out. I was like, oh, thank goodness. a level of my mind that always wants to come into these interactions, imagining that it's going to be white bashing. And there was a little white bashing that I heard in the beginning when I started listening in like 2015 or so. There's a lot of anger directed at whites, mostly from other white women. And so I kind of reflexively expect that coming at me. And I didn't catch that. It was really, instead it's like, you know what, keep doing the work, but relax. And that was kind of nice to hear.
Take a breath. Yeah. That's what we tell people in birth, right? Breathe.
It's okay to not have it all, because I never will have it all, but it's okay to accept that I'm just where I am now, and I'm just going to keep moving ahead from here.
Yeah.
Back to you.
Kim, any takeaways?
I mean, I think I've talked a lot. So, I mean, I've had a lot of takeaways, right? It was just a lot of takeaways, and just like, you know, the little moments that kind of stuck out throughout the conversation. In some of it, I didn't take away anything when I didn't understand where the line of thinking was, but in that whole thing. But yeah, it wasn't my favorite webinar by any means, but I was glad to be here today and have the conversation 101. I think this was more important to me than the conversation I heard in a lot of ways, because it made it personal and be able to take away that way. So yeah, I took away a lot more today in this last hour than I did from that conversation, I think.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad we had it. There was a couple of little nuggets that I took a note on and want to just throw out there. So more to come on being an abolitionist. The idea of abolition, being an abolitionist came up, and I'm hearing that a little bit more and more when we're talking about curriculum around history curriculums. And there's a movement. There was actually either a Facebook page or a Instagram post that I shared around education materials, like what are you doing especially if you're homeschooling, to do some education with your children. And one of those groups is an abolitionist group. So there's a growing movement there. So being an abolitionist is important, was one of the things that someone brought up in this webinar. Someone actually is also said, practice the thing, even if it's not perfect. Your white feelings are not more important than Black lives. So you feeling unsure is not more important than you intervening when the Black kid is being stopped in front of your house, being sat on the curb, and 5 police cars have shown up. Come outside your house, let your presence be known, let that Black person say, I'm here, I'm watching, I want you to be safe. Don't just stand there, because otherwise you're just another white person that they might be afraid of, but actually say something. And then also the other tip that I try to take away for people when there's police involvement in a bunch of squad cars, call the station and alert the captain. They should be coming out. We call them white shirts. Call for a white shirt, because they're the policy holders. And if somebody is, if a cop just on a beat is actually overstepping their boundaries, they're crossing the line, the white shirt is the one who gets them back in line. So they're the ones who review when the webcams haven't been turned on. They're the ones who have to account for why policy is being broken and whether, and what was really going on. So it's just easier if a white shirt is actually on the scene. Other cops start acting differently. And I'm not cop bashing. I have a number of cops in my family who are Black, but it's also me having been a public defender, I also know how that all works. The other takeaway was that someone said they really I think it was the woman who did the meditation or the reflection part. She said, do your healing work and become self-aware, and also get support while you're doing this work. So Vanessa, I like that you talked about being in other groups, and maybe you're in a group with like all white people or your friends where you're holding one another accountable and talking through stuff. That's how we survive as Black people. So it's definitely I think that's really important. And there's 2 more things. One was anti-Asian sentiment is on the rise. So that was like mentioned, wasn't really touched or addressed. I'm assuming that there'll be more discussion around that, but I want us to have a level of awareness about that because they stand out so much as well. And then they asked a question that I think I want to ask in the group, but what are you going to do to eradicate racism and white supremacy this week? Just this week. You don't have to answer it now. I want you to think through it, but you know, as you're setting your agenda, you have your to-do list for this week, adding something on the list. So what are you going to do to eradicate racism and white supremacy this week? Showing up here to the call might be, boom, you're doing your work, right? No, seriously, that might be what you did because there was some learning here. But also showing up in someone else's life, advocating for the neighborhood kid, you know, welcoming a family of color who you see moving in, like genuinely, things like that. Just in your sphere of influence with COVID-19 raging in the world, what can you do? So think about that, and I'll do a thread in the Facebook group so that we can have people commit to something this week. We can be accountable to one another and make sure that we're all doing the work together. So those were my takeaways. Selena, I'll have you close out. Anything that you wanted to share that we didn't talk about yet today?
No, but I did post something in the chat. It's a link to a 2-day seminar that's already passed, but it's important to, I think, visit the site. Group is called Freedom Lifted. My son is 12. He did it was like over 4 weeks. There was one class a week, and it was a history of police in the U.S. And so my son, I think the class was geared towards 12 to 18-year-olds. So he was in there. They had breakout groups. It was very well done. And then they sent out this course, which was a 2-day seminar for educators, which I then forwarded to my favorite educators. And so one of my son's teachers is a young white cis man, and his like when he emails you, it says Black Lives Matter in his signature. And I thought, well, that is freaking awesome. I'm talking about that was before George Floyd. Mm-hmm. So he's a really sweet guy. Like, we did a video call for his mom because it was her birthday and we're all in quarantine, and we all like made a video for his mom. And, you know, so it's a nice and easy relationship. But when I saw that, I said, I wanted to send this information to my favorite educators if you're interested. And it was an expensive course that I wouldn't be able to afford, but it was a response that really means a lot to me, that you said I'm one of your favorite educators. And so, I think I sent it to 6 to 8 educators that I'm personally friends with. And so I don't think, I believe there'll be more classes like that and geared towards maybe different levels of need. But I like this organization. They did a great course for the kids. My son was in class with kids that were in Oakland. There were like riots happening in Oakland. Another kid that was from San Francisco. A kid from where George Floyd, she literally was there in that town. And so it was just great. There was like 400 kids on the call every single week. Wow. So those are the kinds of things that like I've been doing, that I'm going to continue to do. If there's something I feel like my kids should see or be a part, I'm trying to integrate the learning. Mm-hmm. But for me, it's a continuing effort. Like, I don't even think I think about it. I'm just doing, and I see it, and I'm like, oh, people need to know about this. So I did post a link. You guys are welcome to look and see what other offerings they may have coming up.
Okay, I'm going to put it in that thread around education offerings, because hopefully they'll have more sessions. Sometimes you just have to track the program and see if they post new things, or even email them to find out if they are having future sessions. But I just took a look at it. It looks great. And they have the book that they said that they were sending out after the seminar, that always for continuing learning. I think that's amazing. Thank you.
Like, so there's also a timeline of policing in the U.S. I've posted it on my personal Facebook page, but I can post it in the comments in the Google Classroom. I can look for that and post that as well.
Mm-hmm. And or if you think it's good, you want it to be shareable. If it's already on Facebook, you can just share it in the group, and we can do a discussion around it.
Okay.
And add it to the Google Classroom. The other thing is we were talking about the book. Oh, hi. I love little people. Because we were talking about white fragility, the book, it's one of the books that I haven't chosen to put on the list. The two books, you know, we're talking about How to Be an Anti-Racist with Dr. Kendi, and then also following Layla Syed, Me and White Supremacy, and then like her podcast, and specifically because I want to amplify people of color who are doing this work and doing it well. I think Robin has that advantage that her book is out there and she's white and she's got a huge, publishing machine behind her. But I want to really amplify the work of Black and Brown people who are talking about this work and are living this. Even though like I disagree with Dr. Kendi that Black people can be racist, I promote the fact that he is subject to what I'm subject to. So I am going to honor his experience and his work and lift that up. So I think we'll bypass white fragility, although I think people should read it. I just don't think I want to highlight it on this platform. Okay, I think we did it, y'all. And maybe Vanessa was right that these sessions should be 90 minutes because we always go over. But we'll figure it out. You know, we're still shifting and growing and finding what's the sweet spot for us. I am so grateful that you all showed up. I really, really am. And I think the people who show up are the right ones for this discussion. And I think, we have the recording. There'll be an opportunity for people to learn from each one of you. So thank you for showing up and being present and sharing.
I appreciate the chance to be here.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so have a fantastic week. Although we are scheduled to talk about, I don't know if you're Red Table Talk, I mentioned it a little bit earlier. That talk is scheduled for tomorrow, same time, same Zoom link. So I'm going to put that up in the group. But it was about, we'll record it. And I realized part of why we are having the 5 offerings every month is because I know everybody won't be able to jump in on every talk. So we're just trying to figure out how to meet as many needs as possible. But we're going to talk about the white privilege tomorrow, the Red Table Talk with Jada Pinkett Smith. So maybe I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, everybody, have a great day.
Thank you.
Talk soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.